Hi, Anna.
Hi, Dad.
We should clue the audience in because we were just laughing.
Why we're laughing at the very
Because we
beginning
were
of the
deciding
episode.
what we were going to talk about. And you said, okay, so first we'll talk about you and then we'll talk about me. And I said my two favorite subjects. And you said?
In that order.
Yeah.
I just remember I have like one of my favorite memories is I don't know if you remember this. It was when Vivian Goldwyn was born, your brother Peter's youngest daughter.
Hi, niece. Mm-hmm.
And
amazing
we
niece.
were at Grandpa's house having dinner and you were holding Vivian on your lap and you had your phone. She was like holding your phone and it was on the camera and she was like holding the camera to herself to like, obviously she didn't know what she was doing, but it was like to taking a selfie mode. And you go, yes, she's a Goldwyn.
I did. I don't remember that.
It's like one of my favorite memories.
That's really funny. How old were you when Vivi was born?
I was out of college, I think. Just out of college.
Is Vivian 14 now?
Yeah, she's
Goodness
like 13,
gracious.
13, 14, yeah.
Okay.
I was in college when Teddy was born and then just out of college, I think, when she was born.
Right.
I know.
I'm going to apologize to our viewers, listeners. I have a bad cold, so hopefully you'll be able to hear my voice.
People like a cold. It's like a sexy voice.
Oh, is this my sexy voice?
Yeah. Speaking of sexy voice, a million people have sent me this clip of you calling in to call her daddy when Carrie was on. And it was funny, but I will say that you talking about your favorite scandal sex scenes while also being like, oh, I'm with my children in Washington, D.C.
It takes you back because
it's always unsettling.
When Scandal first happened and had these insane sex scenes on network television, you would text me, because I think you were in college, right?
Yeah.
And all I would get these texts, ew, gross. That's disgusting.
That was how I felt. I mean, I feel like I always tolerated it. Like, for me, it was more of a joke. Ew, gross. But like, my roommates who would watch it with me, they were like, because they knew you but didn't fully understand, like, there was like still a level of disconnect.
Like, why am I watching your father have sex?
Totally. They were so freaked out. But
it's so funny.
I mean, I thought that when...
It's a weird job I have.
It's a very weird job. It was also, but it was sweet. It was like I liked that Carrie just picked up the phone and called you, and that when you picked up, you had no idea.
Was I with you in the... Was I with you in the room?
She was like, hi, Tony, and you had no idea that this was before she said she was being recorded on a podcast.
I know, I just saw Carrie was calling me, so I picked up, I was like, hi, Carrie.
And you were like, I'm in D.C. with Jane is here, and Anna and Tess are here, and like, I'm with my family, and then she's like, great, what was your favorite sex scene on Scandal?
I know. It's funny. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, I'm actually doing a podcast right now, and we thought we'd just try you.
Doing a massive podcast called Call Her Daddy with millions of viewers.
Right.
Let's talk about the show. Anyway, it was sweet.
That was sweet.
Yes.
Yes. Well, should we talk about what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah,
Namely
why not?
You?
Or we're just going to talk about that the whole time?
Yeah, people seem to so enjoy our like family-oriented episodes or one-on-one episodes, in addition to our fabulous guests.
Thank you, by the
way. Yes, thank you, by the way. So we thought we'd do one. The last one we did was you sort of interviewing me about the process of Shea Joey, the musical that I co-directed with Savion Glover, which is currently sold out at the Arena Stage in Washington, D.C. last weekend. Although by the time this airs, it probably will be closed because...
So you missed your chance, but maybe not forever.
So anyway, we thought it would be cool. I have some stuff I wanted to ask you about that you have been up to that I find really interesting and kind of inspiring.
That's nice.
We're living through a very complex and divisive time in American politics, in world politics. And I want to talk to you about your platform, Political Playlist, which you started I think you launched it right at the 2020 election cycle, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk to you more because you're now producing a docuseries, or you've producing a pilot for a docuseries, which I think is amazing, which you've already shot the pilot and you're putting it together now, that would be, an extension of Political Playlist, so we'll talk a lot about that. But can you talk to me about what Political Playlist is, how it began, and what its evolution has been,
Yeah. So
including your podcast?
yeah, so it kind of has gone through a couple iterations. Political Playlist basically was born out of me and my, at the time, one partner, but now two partners in it, Anthony and Michael, seeing that, meeting some young people who were running for Congress and being very inspired by, this was, back around the 2020 election cycle, and being very inspired by mainly just, like, how they were as people. Kind of policies aside, it was really refreshing to meet people who, as millennials, like, talked like us, had the same sort of generational experience as us, communicated in new ways that we hadn't really seen politicians communicate in the past, and that led us to crunch some numbers and see that at the time, it hasn't changed much since. It's gone a little bit up and down, but about 14% of Congress was under the age of 45, which we considered, like, young in politics, and, which now as I'm getting older, I still consider young.
Well, considering that
Um,
our average age is what, 80 something?
well, so this is what's crazy. The average age of the Senate hovers somewhere in the high 60s, and the average age of the House hovers somewhere in the high 50s, and it's only going up. But I think actually next term it probably will go down, specifically in the House, because a lot of very old people in Congress, specifically on the left, are retiring their seats, which I think is the correct thing to do for the future of our country. But anyway, back to Political Playlist. So at first, we had it as a newsletter. We built this website, which you can go visit, politicalplaylist.com, where we made this great, like, interactive map of all of the members of Congress, both Republican and Democrat, who are under 45 years old, where they're from, who they are, what made them run. And then over time, we evolved. Everyone kind of thought we were a podcast, so we evolved from our original newsletter into a podcast, which is what we've been doing for the last couple of years. And the podcast is me, Anthony, and Michael, most of the time just talking about the news, but we talk about it through the lens of what these young people are doing and saying. And then every once in a while, we have some of these young lawmakers from Congress on. We'll have young people in state offices on, but then we also have guests sometimes on who are just sort of related to the idea of, like, what is the future of politics? What does our next generation of political leaders and thinkers look like? So that's what we've been doing. And the evolution has always been adherent to our original mission, which is, like, twofold, really: to understand who these people are that carry the responsibility to hopefully right that divisiveness that you talked about.
Mhm.
But then the other mission that we've become a little bit more passionate about recently is to elect more young people into, specifically, Congress is what we focus on, because as much there's amazing people running around the country for mayor's races and state legislatures and all of that stuff. But what we have focused on is Congress, because we think it's really important to have people who are our age, and now, we have Gen Z members of Congress, um, who can be at the highest level of government, legislating on a federal level. And so we've been, trying to make that happen. And by the way, it's like, we don't agree with every person that we cover, but we think that having them all there is important, and having people with different views is important. And I think that many people can agree that those people should not be 85 years old in their seats for a variety of reasons.
It also should be said that the platform is nonpartisan, even though in conversation, you and Michael, and perhaps to slightly lesser degree, Anthony, are progressive. Anthony seems
I
more,
would say we're varying degrees of left, but yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, but you absolutely feature, and certainly on the website, it's completely nonpartisan. And, in your conversations with your interviews, it's people from all perspectives, which I find really interesting.
One thing that I've become more comfortable with and felt more confident about is not just supporting, when I see people on the right that I think are doing interesting things, saying that and being okay with saying that. But also, I think that often what has happened on the Democratic side is that there's a lack of self-criticism because everybody is so kind of, like, obsessed with winning, and I think that there's a lot of people on the left that I will disagree with, and now I feel like I really have the information and feel empowered to say why I disagree with those things.
Mm.
So I think, like, yes, it's nonpartisan in what we cover, but we do inject our own opinion into it, which we, by the way, like, didn't at first. We really tried to keep it very objective. But then the reality is like, we're not journalists. And so we felt like we actually were missing out on, like, some commentary that people might find relatable, because I think a lot of people have complex political views like we do, where, you're not gonna agree with everything on one side and disagree with everything on the other side, and we all need to be more comfortable with saying that.
Do you still have on the I haven't been on the website for a while. Do you still have the same algorithm where someone can take a survey and then you match them up with 5
We do.
politicians from
We
their
do. You can go on our website and you can take a survey, and it will match you with 5 politicians under the age of 45 who kind of align with the things that you care about. You can choose if you want to have a mix of Republican and Democrats. You can, if you have all Republicans or all Democrats, you can choose a curveball option, which then your 5th politician will be from the other party. But what I will, and then you'll basically get an automated newsletter sent to your email with sort of who those people are. We used to be newsletter focused, and so you would get a new email every single week to track those people. But then as we shifted to the podcast, we have not really kept up with doing the newsletter portion of it because we found that the podcast was more, people were engaging with that more. So if you want to go on the website and just learn about some new people, that's 100% available to
I
you.
highly recommend it. I mean, one of the I wanna get to what the real impetus your evolution even to get to create a political
Mhm.
platform. But, so often I think, a barrier to entry in terms of civic engagement in our political system is people don't know where to begin because there's such a tidal wave of information every day. Everyone seems to be, spinning. Everyone seems to be looking for money. As soon as you inquire about something, you get 5,000 emails,
Right.
or from whoever you're interested in. And I find it can be a real turnoff, and particularly for younger people who are busy getting their careers off the ground, people, just trying to pay the rent. It's too it's over can be overwhelming to get engaged, and you can become either just too busy or just a little cynical. The cool thing about Political Playlist's platform is it's a great way to kind of, you know, get begin the journey of familiarity with who our future leaders are, or who our current young leaders are. And in my experience, just that breaking through that first, into that first
Mhm.
level of consciousness and awareness, it's not that complex. It seems complex, but it's not that complex. And you start to get a sense of it, and it's quite interesting and easy to digest. So if you go into Political Playlist, politicalplaylist.com, I'm not selling. I honestly think this is a really ingenious way to kind of get some base knowledge and whet your appetite. um, you just fill out this 5-minute survey about where you're from, what your party affiliation is, what issues most concern you or most interest you, whether you want a cross section of politicians with multiple views, whether you just want people from your district or state, or you want people from across the country. I personally wanted like to get a broad view of things,
Mhm.
and then you have 5 people that when you get your people, you get information about how to find out more about them, but and what they represent. And you can also change up your playlist if you go, well, let's replace one. You can like
Mhm.
give me more choices, and you can start to do it. I just find it's a really simple, easy way the website is very well done. I think you guys got nominated for a Webby Award your first year.
We got nominated for a Webby, and we were for a Webby Award, and we were beat by the White House, which felt
Yeah,
very
right.
unfair. when it
Exactly.
comes to the level of resources available.
Yeah, David and Goliath there.
But yeah, our website does look really cool. And I will say, like, we've amended our podcast structure a little bit recently, kind of to serve exactly what you're saying, which is that we have 2 short episodes a week. And one of those episodes that we release on Thursdays is, we call it On Our Playlist. And it's just a 20 to 30-minute episode about one young politician, and sort of an issue that is relevant to them right now. And so that's another way that if you just really want to kind of like have the barriers taken down to learn about some new people, Thursdays at Political Playlist Happy Hour would be the place to tune in. One thing that's been really cool, and I hope that people who engage with us on social media or the podcast or whatever, is that we started covering people in 2020 who were new representatives, who were young, right? Like 40 years old. And now they're like leading the Democratic Party. So I think specifically on the Democratic side, but also on the Republican side. Like there's a guy named Pete Aguilar who's from California, who when he was
Mhm.
elected, we covered him. He was just kind of like us. I think he was a state representative before. Now he's like the number 3 Democrat in the House. Elise Stefanik, you've probably heard her name. She's a Republican from New York. We started covering her. She had been elected for one term when we started Political Playlist, but she was kind of just this like she was the youngest Republican woman ever elected to Congress at that time. And then she obviously has now had this insane political journey that has ended in her not being in politics anymore,
A
which
little bit
is
in
like,
flames at the
but so
moment.
it's, my
Right.
point is that like, it's very
Oh, Ruben Gallego is another one,
Ruben Gallego, who started
of
as just sort
Arizona.
of like a Marine veteran running in Arizona, and now he's this incredibly notable senator from Arizona, and the list goes on. And what I think is cool is like, what I think that people get critical about like romanticizing politicians, and that's not what we're trying to do. But what we're trying to show is that like, if you know who these people are and you watch their journey, you have a deeper understanding of like what is happening in this very complex body of government that we all kind of know about but don't really know about. And I think it gives you, like you said, that just like touchstone, because the truth is that, like Michael and I now with this docuseries that we're pitching, we talk about it all the time. Like they are characters in the story of America. They are each individual narratives, that they all have different reasons for why they're there. They all have different journeys once they get elected, and following those journeys in like a non-romanticized way, but in a informed way, it gives you a connection to the political system, I think, that otherwise can be lacking and often can result in a lot of cynicism.
Yeah, and cynicism is, um is
Cynicism
the
leads to
enemy
inaction.
in action. I mean, that's the thing I feel so strongly about, and we've talked about since you were a kid. You know, I feel like we how whatever with all the sort of flaws in our system and our body politic and all that, um, what is so extraordinary about the country that we live in and the system that we live in, imperfect as it is, we're always aspiring to something that's unattainable, as we do in all aspects of life. But you know, the freedom that we have to speak out and use our voice, the freedom we have to vote and to choose our leaders, and the structure that we have, which is being, sorely tested these days, in my view, with the 3 branches of government that create I think a complicated but healthy tension,
Mhm.
uh, is pretty amazing, and the cynicism contributes to the erosion of that freedom, and so the answer is I feel like we have a right and therefore a responsibility to participate. And it's too easy because, like I said before, people get busy, they have other pressures in their lives. But when they don't participate, the whole thing starts to, is in danger of collapse. And then we see what happens in different kinds of systems, and where things we take for granted as just being the way it is very
Yeah.
much the way it isn't.
Yeah.
And that shit's real. So,
Yeah.
it's up to us to participate. So, yeah,
When I think
yeah.
participation can look that this is what I always think is important to note is that, like, I don't think that participation has to be active this is maybe a controversial view, but, like, I don't think participation has to be active participation. I think that participation can also be consumption.
Mhm.
If you just decide that you're gonna learn a couple things a week and, like, come home every day and turn on the news for an hour, like, to me, that is participation because you are then creating yourself as part of an ecosystem that has a level of information that that if given the opportunity or if somebody asks you a question, you might then feel compelled to sort of be a more active participant. But I think that where people get stuck is this idea of like, oh, it's kind of all or nothing. It's like I either have to know everything and be able to talk about all the issues, or I should just believe that politics isn't for me and that politics is stupid. And I remember like when like a long time ago, Billy said to me, he was like, yeah, politics is like Game of Thrones. And I was like, yeah, but also like so is life. Like that, like it is in a frustrating way, this sort of Game of Thrones-esque kind of power struggle. But I think that what you see when you peel back the curtain and look at these people as individuals and these issues as individual issues is that there's all these different mechanisms that make it up, and the more you can just understand that and be informed about that, the better, like, equipped you'll be to make your own decisions in your own life, whether it's, like, about your healthcare or what insurance you're gonna like, I think if you know about how crazy and screwed up our healthcare system is, just because you watch the news or you listen to a podcast about it, you will be better at making a decision about your own healthcare,
Mhm.
and that is, like, I think the selfish side of government that people shouldn't be afraid of, which is that if you know more, you will it's not doesn't always have to be about, like, enriching the collective. It can just be about making better decisions in your own life.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the action that I feel we all have to take is to vote.
Yeah, I mean,
I agree with
that's the
what you're
bare
saying
minimum,
completely.
honestly.
But, yeah, I mean, that's the bare minimum, and it's easy to do, and but to do so from a place of, if you have like you said, a very easy lift, steady consumption
Mhm.
of information, to really get your head around the people who we hire to run this country, and it has a major impact on each of our lives,
Yeah.
and to just have a sense of that. So, anyway, you guys provide a really cool platform, and then the
Thank you.
the podcast itself, is it's just like a hangout, really. It's the vibe of it. You
Yeah, we
talk about,
started calling it
uh,
our group text. That's our new,
yeah, it's
like,
like a group
tagline.
text of Anna, Anthony, and Michael focusing on one issue for, what is it, 20 minutes? Well, now you have 2 shorter ones, right? You used to have 2 shorter
So
ones a
now we
week.
have 2 short episodes. So on Tuesdays, we release an episode called How to Talk About, and we pick, an issue that is very timely, and we kinda deep dive into it and talk about which young politicians are sort of talking about it, related to it. For example, this past week, which when this releases will have been 2 weeks ago, we talked specifically about the Strait of Hormuz in Iran, and so kind of taking an element of the war in Iran and being like, "Okay, but why is this place really important? What before all of this craziness was happening with the war, what was going on in the Strait of Hormuz? And what are some people on the left and the right saying about it, and, like, should we be listening to that?" And Tuesday is more like a kind of short news episode, and then Thursday, like I said, we focus on a politician. The one we did last week was really interesting. We focused on Representative Seth Magaziner, who actually
Right.
is one of Rhode Island's 2 representatives, and he came on our podcast a couple months ago. He represents Block Island, which is cool. And he is one of the co-sponsors of a bill. Like, this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's kinda crazy. So, there's been all this talk about trying to ban members of Congress from trading stocks, which something
Right.
like 78% of the American public thinks should be a law. The problem is that there's like 4 different bills, some of them bipartisan, some of them not, within Congress that are trying to make their way through. I think eventually this will pass, but there's a new side to this, which is that he's co-sponsored a bill to make sure that politicians in Congress do not trade on betting markets like Kalshi and Polymarket.
Mhm.
And because if you had heard anything, there was all these bets happening around the Iran war. People were making tons of money. Now
I know, it's
Kalshi is
crazy.
Kalshi
What
is
you guys said
actually
about how
saying,
much money is how the growth in that industry in the past
yeah,
couple
it's
of years is
crazy. It's
madness.
crazy. And so Kalshi is now saying that they're actually not gonna pay out some of these things because one thing you can't bet on their site is violence, and they say that that was violence, but then you can bet on politics. So anyway, it's a very gray area, but the main point of what he's saying at is like, whatever is happening, people in Congress who have inside information about these kinds of things should not be betting
Mm.
on Kalshi of whether or not the Ayatollah of Iran is going to be killed when some people might know that that is going to be happening. So anyway, we talked about him, but we also talked about
Insider
something that
trading,
feels
basically. Yep.
it's insider trading, but like to the easiest way, like it's I
Mhm.
don't know. To me, there's just this like the whole betting market thing is I don't know. I have
As
an
well.
aversion to gambling already, so that's just like next level for me.
Yeah,
But
same.
anyway, those are our those are
Mhm.
that's how our podcast is released.
Yeah, so let's rewind. We're gonna get to the series in a second, but can you talk about your evolution of why politics interested you, how that evolved for you, to degree a degree that made you guys do all this work
Yeah.
for this?
It's been a lot of work.
You guys put a
Um,
lot of work into this.
um, Honestly, I mean, like, you and mom were, I guess, the beginning of it. I feel like I was always just aware of politics. Mom liked to yell at the television a lot, I feel like, when I was a kid eating dinner. Um, and I don't know, and I think I always was aware of it, but I don't know, I think this is true for a lot of millennials, a little different for Gen Z now, but, like, I wasn't in high school thinking about, what was going on in the political world. I was aware, I think, through you and mom, but I was not, in the way that I think some people in Gen Z when they were in high school were very activated. I think largely due to social media, that was not the case. But then in 2008, you took me to the Democratic convention when Obama was first nominated.
When you turned 18.
When I turned 18, I had just turned 18. Yeah.
Mhm. You had just turned 18, so your first time to vote. Mhm.
Yeah. And which was obviously just like an insane experience, whether you like or don't like Obama, to see that person, um, becoming the new face of the left was really powerful, and it was really fun to be there and kind of, was again, I don't think that I was suddenly like, "Oh my god, I'm a political person," but just to see that world was really interesting. But then it was like it was 2016, it was a while. It was
Mm.
when I was in my mid-20s that I, like a lot of people, saw Trump and felt, "I don't think that this person should be our president," and, for many reasons, in my own opinion, and that was really when I got engaged. That was, like, when I first went out and canvassed for the first time and met other people who were involved in the campaign and went with you to do some stuff to campaign, and
Yeah, we campaigned in Iowa
yeah, which
during the
was
primaries, I remember.
crazy.
Yeah, that was cool.
Um Going to, like, people's you just literally would go to people's living rooms and, like, because
Mhm.
the caucus system there is so different, the way that people vote, it's very community oriented. Um, and, I think that it's, like, for a lot of people, there has to be some, like, natural interest into it. You can't kind of force your way into being, activated about politics. 'Cause I think it's so easy to kind of sit back from it. So then it was like, it was 2016, and like a lot of young women at the time, I was very upset, when Trump was elected, and I went to DC for the Women's March, which was a really crazy experience, um, and that was kind of it for me, was suddenly feeling, "Okay, maybe there's something that maybe I can play a part in this," because I feel like my I suddenly have a little bit of a passion to participate more actively, which I think goes to what I'm saying before. It's like the reason I was able to participate actively is because I had a foundation of participating passively. And some people are activated overnight, they don't care, and then suddenly they care because something happens to them or someone they love or whatever. But, but that was it for me, and so then when, like, I started, like I said, going to some campaign events in LA, meeting some people, that was really then the genesis of Political Playlist started to feel very natural, and, it has been a lot of work. I mean, it's been a very big project, and I've tried to always kind of, like, approach it with a lens of a storyteller and, like, not one of the big struggles for me has been being both, like, a writer and a artist, but also having that and, like, constantly trying to find sort of the connective tissue between the 2 things because the truth is, like, I could have tried to make that my whole job, but I didn't want to. Or I could have,
Mhm.
when we, like, didn't get like, when we couldn't, like, monetize it at first, I could have just said, "Okay, it's not working," and left it. But I have tried to kind of balance the 2 things, and now what's interesting is they are finally, coming together in this sort of creative way.
Yeah, one thing that interests me, I remember when, on election night 2016 when, Trump won, and, you were genuinely shocked and upset. I remember
Yeah.
you called me, in tears. You were really really upset and worried about it, um, and but the thing you said to me was, "I need to go." There's obviously so much about this country that I don't understand because
Mhm.
there are people who view things very differently than me, and I need to go understand that. Like, I can't remember if you said this, but you said something like, "I need to go to these red states and understand where people are," because there was a lot of people that really want this guy to be president. How could I have such a distorted view of reality
Mhm.
so it was like, as opposed to being simply, I need to now activate, to get the people I think, should be
Mhm.
to activate my point of view. Your perspective for me seemed more like I need to understand something that I clearly don't understand about this country, which I thought was interesting and quite evolved.
Yeah, and then I, like every other white person on the left, read Hillbilly Elegy.
Right. Right, exactly. No, but even more, but no, you started Political Playlist,
Yeah.
and also when you started Political Playlist, was earlier in your relationship with Billy, and Billy grew up in a very Republican family, where Fox News is on, pretty steadily in his grandma's house, and, and had, I think, been a kind of Republican where it was just kind of assumed that that's kind of was culturally just what you did, right? His
Mhm.
dad had been a Navy pilot uh, whereas kind of we came from more left, Democratic thing where it was sort of the same thing where it was just like, well,
Mhm.
that's just what we do, and those are our set of assumptions. So, I think it was Billy who challenged you to say, why would you make this a partisan platform? Like, you
Mhm.
need all views in this. Is that correct that he
Yeah, I mean, I remember
encouraged you to do
there
that?
was a conversation very early on where I was, like, ranting about something, and he said he said, "That's that's my family," that you're kind of poo-pooing or whatever, and, and I think it's a lot of people have that to any degree. I mean, like, even where we grew up, it was a different kind of conservative than his family, but there was a lot of conservative people who were more sort of like banker conservatives, and, I certainly had friends that were leaning more conservative who I think since have become less so because of Trump, but not in their actual values, but just in sort of the
Mhm,
politics of it. And, and I think that what that was the interesting journey for Political Playlist was at first, I think we felt this, like, responsibility to be like, "Okay, we're not gonna pick a side." Like, we really do want to showcase all these people, and then it evolved because it was like, "Okay, but we can give all of these people attention and try to inform our audience about all these people," but it felt very unnatural to then be, like, holding in our own opinions. So we've
mhm,
eventually made that decision to allow ourselves to be opinionated, but I think for me, the way that I express my opinions now, I do try to be less reactionary. And and I think it's important to have people around you that challenge that and keep you in line and don't just, like, feed your inner anxiety about the world, because and that's what I mean, and that's what we are trying to do when we have our conversations on our podcast is, like and now in this docuseries is to take the anxiety out of it and be like, "Okay, let's have a conversation that doesn't just end in, like, everyone being upset and scared about our future, or on the other side, everyone cheerleading to an extent that just feels, like, completely wrong."
Yeah.
Um, so I think that collectively as a country, whether you're left, right, or in between, there's a very elevated sense of anxiety about our political system and our government.
Well, and I feel what's cool about that is and I hear it in your conversations, particularly with the more conservative members that you talk to, you know, it's gotten right now we're at a situation where we can't even have it's very difficult to have the conversation. So we sit in our bubbles and just rant, and share like
Mhm.
mindsets. And for me, as much as I hold the views that I hold very strongly, I know that what makes our system work is the tension. But, I'm not always right. I need someone to go, no, I totally disagree with that. And they go, well, one of the things I really admire about your mom, as you mentioned when the town where we raised you in Connecticut, it was a very Republican town, albeit not MAGA didn't exist then, but it was conservative Bush Republicans, and it was during the Bush years. And so when we moved there, uh, we'd have dinner parties with our neighbors and friends, and Jane would be like, "It's so funny." In politics is generally a very uncomfortable, uh, conversation for people, so we'd sit around a dinner table of maybe 8 or 10 people, and Jane would go as we all sat down when, their wine has been poured, and she'd go, "So, I'm guessing that we're the only Democrats at the table." And there'd be stiff silence for a minute with these people, and multi-gender some were older people, some were but what would happen is a conversation would start, and people would start to get, "Well, that's true," and she would kinda just launch in, and it was during the Iraq War, and we'd talk about that, and we'd have these amazing conversations, and it was a sort of a standard thing, and sometimes it would get very heated. We had a couple of friends, who were at the dinner table sometimes who were very far left, and they'd get really exercised, or big, Bush supporters who felt that, the left was really a problem, but it was great because we would have these conversations, and that's where I think we need to get back to be able to be willing to take, see the value in the where we disagree. So
I also think that
and
the conversations and it doesn't have to be these big intellectualized things, but just mentioning it to people when you might feel uncomfortable to do so. I think that there's this fear maybe of like, oh, if I'm going to have my beliefs challenged or I'm not going to be able to, stand firm in them. And I feel like the only way to reinvigorate your own values and own beliefs is by having them challenged by someone or is by putting them in uncomfortable situations. Because if you're just talking with people that you agree with, you're not actually ever, um, you're not really, for the most part, in my opinion, unless you're someone who's very well read on these issues, you're kinda just saying bullshit. Like, you're sorta
yeah,
just
I
saying
agree.
whatever you heard, repeating things, but the only way that you actually learn how to, um, like I said, reinvigorate those values and re-identify with your points of view is when you have to explain them to people who don't share them. And it can be uncomfortable because if someone else starts to poke holes in what you're saying, you might, this happened to me where you kind of get flustered and you have to kind of orient yourself in what you know about what you're talking about, and sometimes admit that you don't know, and then maybe that
Mhm.
pushes you to go make sure that you have more information.
Yeah, and it
But
gets us out of groupthink,
yeah,
because we're all oriented that way from, like, school days, it's
yeah,
like, this is the cool perspective because the majority of my peers are into this, so I'm into
mhm.
it, and that, and it that's not, you know, we 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 needn't move through our lives. It's
Yeah.
not the most effective way to move through our lives. The other thing I would add to that is it's you start to realize that you can share fundamental bedrock values with people and yet have very different opinions and perspectives on what the solutions are, what the way
Mhm.
to, actualize those values are, but then I have this a lot, with friends who are conservative. I go, "We basically, share so many values. We just have different perspectives on the way to get there," and
Yeah.
that's okay. Then I can really respect them as people and just go, "Wow, man, we just disagree on
Well,
the
and I think most
solutions."
people hope that's where politics can get back to, right? And it's
Yeah.
hard because I feel like people are always like, "Oh, let's get back to, like, politics of civility," and I'm like, "Well, at the same time, I I think when you look at politics of the past, like, yeah, maybe on the surface, people weren't being as mean to each other, but I think behind the scenes, there's a lot of stuff happening that is, was not was not so good, and I think and by the way, I think there were way less women, way less people of
Yeah.
like, I don't think that the politics of your is that the phrase? The politics of your like,
Of yesteryear,
of
yeah.
yesteryear is the gold standard, but
No.
I think that what people feel now is, like, how nice would it be if the debates that were happening, even if they became nasty, were actually about, policy solutions to things and not just sort of insulting people left and right because that is
Yeah, I mean,
ultimately very unproductive.
more I think what you had was, at least in Washington, people, mostly men, who, were of very different political persuasions,
Mhm.
but knew each other well and actually were real
Yeah.
friends, and could fight all day about something in a very bloody way,
Mhm.
but then have dinner and care about each
Yeah.
other's families, you know what I mean? Like, that's,
Well,
there's famous stories about that, but
right.
that's the kind of thing. Wouldn't it be nice if we could get back to that? But
Well, and I hope that when there's sort of this new generation of people in politics, that maybe that is the new standard that can be set, which is that, okay, I think that a lot of the reason those people were able to go and have dinner and feel bonded is because most of them were 40-something-year-old white men, and they had something in common with each other because they could talk about their wives or their children or their past or whatever,
play
and
golf
how
or whatever it
their
was.
golf, like, whatever, yeah, and now how great would it be if you can have a bunch of people in their late 20s, and 30s and early 40s being like, "Okay, well, now we can talk about our collective experience, but it's in a much less, not to be ageist about it, but it's in a way that is more inclusive as opposed to just like we're all bonding over being golf-loving middle-aged white men. Instead, we're bonding over the fact that, like, the seminal experiences of our life and, growing up have been 9/11 and COVID, and, like,
Mhm.
that is something that people in their 50s, 60s, and beyond will never understand as these, like, seminal things that really shaped who we are, so anyway, that's my pitch
Yeah, that's
for
cool.
what I hope.
Okay, so before we end, just I think it's really interesting this docuseries that you produced a pilot for that, hopefully you're going to sell. But I thought the pilot was so exciting. Do you want to just tell us about that because it's a cool project?
Yeah, so we basically came up with this idea, like, last year at some point, that, we've gotten to know both personally and from afar who so many of these young lawmakers are around the country, and we kind of came up with a concept that's sort of like a road trip show, and it would be similar to when you watch, like, an Anthony Bourdain where he's going, parts unknown, he's going to different areas to taste the food. What would it be like if we went to different areas, but instead of the episode revolving around food, it revolved around politics and culture, and specifically, like, youth culture and youth politics, and so the show is me and Michael host it, and we are traveling around the country, going to different parts of the United States that are represented by young people in Congress. So we'll go to visit a district anywhere from Florida to Iowa to Michigan to Texas to California and meet the young person who represents that area in Congress, learn about their story, learn about what the district is like, and then interview young people, young constituents in the area about their lives and try to find, like, do people who work on farms in Iowa who are 30 years old have commonalities with people who live in the Bronx who are 30 years old? Because I think the answer is probably yes. There's obviously a lot of differences, but what we really want to show through this is like not just who these young leaders are, although that's sort of the marquee of the show, but also just painting a picture of what is it like to be a young person in America right now? What are the issues that we're dealing with? Do we feel do we feel hopeful about our future? I think there's a lot of pressure on a lot of people my age and younger to kind of feel like, especially if you're on the left, I think regardless of your political persuasion, but right now because Trump's in office, if you're on the left, I think when Biden was in office, it was what was being
Mhm.
fed to young people on the right, that like the world is ending and it's a doomsday scenario. And the question that we have is like, do young people actually feel like that? Is that something that those of us who are like hyper engaged are being fed, but actually isn't resonating with most people? And so, our goal is really to just paint a picture of like this very complicated patchwork of young people in America and what it means for the future of our political system. And it's fun. Like, it's fun and hopeful, and our first episode was in Orlando, Florida, with Representative Maxwell Frost, who's the youngest member of Congress. He was elected to Congress when he was 25 years old.
25 years old. Amazing.
So now he's 28, and he's the first Gen Z member of Congress. And, we went and talked to him. Orlando's a very blue area in a very red state now. And so that's kind of an interesting juxtaposition. We talked to his opponent, who's run against him twice, who was this really interesting guy, who's like a local TV host. And then a bunch of other young people who owned businesses or worked at, one guy worked at a racetrack. We talked to,
And a lot of them were completely unengaged in politics. They just had so much to deal with their own lives.
completely unengaged, which I think is most people, right? Like, I think a lot
Yeah,
of people are either totally unengaged or just very lightly engaged, and that was our experience in talking to them.
yeah,
So yeah, it's hopefully gonna be coming to a screen near you at some point.
yeah. Is it called what is the
It's
t
called
do you have
Political
an
Playlist.
it's called Political Playlist, okay, right, yeah.
Yeah,
It's really, really
yeah.
cool. I have high expectations for it. I think it's a
Thank
really
you.
cool idea. Anyway,
It's been very fun.
well, Anna,
Well,
I'm proud of you. Um,
thanks, Dad.
I like that I feel proud that you're a well-rounded individual.
That's nice of
No, I mean,
you.
you managed to do, a lot of different things, but have a with purpose, so I think that's cool, and, what you guys are doing is really unique and I think important, so
Thank you.
thanks for telling us about it.
Well, thanks for leading me in this direction since I was but a wee child.
A wee child, a wee lass. All right, baby, well, let's wrap it up there.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us,
Thank you for
Anna.
joining us.
Thank you for joining us, viewers and listeners. But thank you, Anna, for sparing your time. What do we say to guests? It means a lot to us that you came to. This is a really great conversation. Anyway,
All right, we'll
until
end
next
it
week,
there.
where we're back with other people.
Yes.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Far From the Tree. Be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.